Welcome to Formosa Dream Chasers.
We're your hosts, Mary Ann
and Chiang.
Please join us as we explore the journeys amazing people take in pursuit of their dreams.
And get insights from their experiences.
Let's hit the road.
And get started.
Hello everyone and welcome to the show. Today I'm super happy to get the chance to sit down and chat with Michelle Chiang, who you might know as the host of Geek Out, which is one of our other programs here at RTI. However, today we are going to be talking to her about her role as the founder of Phoenix Dice. Phoenix Dice is a company known for selling uniquely designed dice and dice accessories used for tabletop role-playing games. Hello, Michelle, and thanks for joining me today.
Hi, and hi, everybody. I am so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you. I'm also super excited to sit down and chat with you about your business. But before getting into that, could you please tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background?
Oh, absolutely. The reason why I host the show Geek Out is because I am a huge nerd. But not just that. I'm a jack of all trades nerd, so I know at least a little bit about just about everything, not to toot my own horn because jack of all trades, master of none, right? So I figure it was a good idea to start up some kind of show where I could really get passionate and geek out about stuff, nerd out about certain topics, and I think that stems from my background as a third culture kid who got bounced around a lot, back and forth from the United States and Taiwan, and being raised essentially in two different cultures. The third is just it's kind of an interesting culture that evolves with all of us people who are, I guess we feel like we don't essentially belong to any. And I'm also very introverted, so this whole TTRPG thing came very much out of introversion.
Okay. And, I have to confess that I actually learned more about tabletop role-playing games from you since I wasn't exposed to this growing up. In the Philippines, when I was going to school and hanging out with my friends, we didn't really do a lot of the tabletop role-playing games. And you were the one who got us all together, like a couple of the hosts. And then we played Dungeons and Dragons for your program, Geek Out. And I found it to be a really fun and all-around amazing experience, and I would highly encourage everyone to try it out at least once. But for our listeners' reference, what would you say are tabletop games?
Okay, the answer to your question, what are tabletop games, is at the same time very simple and also very complicated. I think at this point, the most famous one that most people have probably heard about is Dungeons and Dragons that you mentioned. And if people want to take a listen or have a listen to that on Geek Out, that was exactly or all nearly 1 year ago. We're actually going to be featuring another tabletop role-playing game this October called Monster of the Week. Essentially what people do is they sit around a table, hence the name tabletop game, and we play a role. We choose a character, we develop that character according to the rules, and then we play that as that character in a story that is written by the game master, dungeon master. They go by a number of names, but one person is in charge of weaving the tale or the adventure. And then all the players are responsible for kind of like a choose your own adventure book. People all decide together cumulatively how the story goes. And that is essentially what Phoenix Dice caters to, because a lot of tabletop role-playing games, they need some form of how to decide about something. Like, is your character able to do a certain task? Now, of course, the DM can just say yes or no. The dungeon master, can just say yes or no, but what's the fun in that? The fun comes when you add something like dice in, because it definitely creates a possibility of chaos. And that, I think, is the most fun about tabletop games.
Right. It throws in chance.
Yeah.
It throws
random.
in that random chance, and you never know what the result is going to be. And that's
exactly
both interesting and exciting.
Absolutely. Okay. Super exciting. And, I have some ridiculous stories of what happens when people roll really well or really, really poorly. So.
I can imagine. So how did your interest in tabletop gaming and dice begin?
So I was a teenager, and being a nerdy, introverted teenager, people are naturally inclined, I think, to find other nerdy, introverted teenagers that might share the awkwardness of talking. I think
Okay.
that's the best way to put it. So, having a tool such as a game is very much a social experience that naturally forges bonding and friendship. So, in high school is when I was first exposed to Dungeons and Dragons. At that time, it was second edition. I'm exposing how old I am if anyone wants to look up how old that is. But I had a little bit of a taste of it. And then, of course, I kind of didn't play for a very, very long time and just did normal board game, or I should say, typical or more known board games such as your very famous Monopoly and things like that for quite a while. And then when I moved back to Taiwan, my friend Eric Gao, who has been featured very often on my show, was like, "Hey, Michelle, you want to come over and play some games?" And I'm like, "Are we playing Monopoly?" He said, "Yeah, sure, exactly that." And then it was not. It led down a snowball momentum journey, an adventure in itself that eventually wound up with us playing multiple campaigns together. And that was quite fun.
Okay. Was there a specific moment that made you decide to create your own dice business? I mean, from being a person who enjoys playing a game to deciding to invest time and effort to setting up a business. I mean, those are two different things. So what made you make that jump?
Yes, those are very different things. I have to kind of explain the raccoon or the crow instinct that some people have, the goblin instinct, where you like small shiny things.
Yes.
Yes, the raccoon brain loves small shiny things that look like gemstones, and I think that is essentially the reason why I like dice so much. And I don't even have to play a game with the dice. I just like the dice themselves, just to have them because they're pretty. And that led me down a very different rabbit hole, I guess adjacent rabbit hole, of collecting vintage dice. Dice that are rare, low production, dice that might actually be very valuable because, for example, there are discontinued dice because they contain the same glitter that's used in the euro, and therefore are illegal. They have to be destroyed.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so I have some of those dice because they're cool. And the way that people collect rare and vintage dice is there are I should explain okay. This is difficult because there's layers and layers of this ridiculous nerdery. There are communities online, like on Facebook, of people who love dice. And for example, I would list all the dice that I'm willing to trade, and then I would also say I'm looking for this. And then somebody might message me and say, "Oh, I have that. Are you willing to trade?" And then we would ship dice to each other, sometimes across vast distances. And we're not talking about like complete sets. Sometimes it's one piece at a time, one single die, until you can complete a set. And there's a lot of, super positive, validating feelings about completing a very rare antique set. But that is when I realized that shipping out of Taiwan is very cheap compared to shipping out of, say, the United States, because the government here does subsidize, a lot of shipping in order to encourage business. So with that in mind, ready, audience, any listeners who might be triggered by the mention of cancer and or death, the possibility of death staring that down the barrel, I would suggest you fast forward a little bit. I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. Oh my goodness, how long was that ago? I'm just going to use age, when I was 33. And when I was diagnosed, of course, the impact of that news is it puts a lot of things into perspective. Sitting there and thinking about what I really want to do with my life. At the time, I was working for a company that I didn't like, doing a job that I didn't necessarily like. So I decided that I should, if everything goes well, which it did, thankfully. That's the good news. Everything's fine now. is that I should probably redirect my decisions in my life to do something that I really want to do. And with the background that I knew about trading rare and vintage dice, and then my husband also mentioned that, we are right near the manufacturing hub of the world, which is China and some of Southeast Asia. Why don't you just sell dice online? And that kind of started the idea. I was like, wow, I can really do that. And that sent me down that path. Actually, the reason why I selected the name Phoenix Dice, because of all mythological creatures,
Yes.
the Phoenix is most appealing to me, or was most appealing to me, still is, at that time, because phoenixes. They're immortal. They do
Sure.
die. Yeah,
Yeah.
they explode in a flaming mess, but they rise again from their ashes. And it's a very beautiful meaning for people who experience catastrophe in their life of any kind, to just have faith that you will rise again from your ashes.
That's really beautiful. You don't see me right now, but I'm actually really touched and getting teary-eyed by your story. Yeah. Um, that's amazing. And I love how you were able to find strength in your own passion and interests to help push you forward during that really difficult period.
Oh, thank you. It was it's difficult because, if you imagine, that's pretty much the closest that most people ever come to staring death in the face, besides actually when it's at the end of life. And it's like, what are you supposed to do with it? It puts everything into perspective. Like, it knocks out all of your small problems and really makes you reevaluate what you're doing with yourself. And yeah, that's why I decided to sell dice. It sounds that in
Okay.
itself, I guess, trivial. It sounds little, but I love dice, so it's a passion.
I was curious as you were telling your story, by
Mm.
that time, like how long were you trading dice? Because you said you started during your teens. So was this an ongoing passion all throughout?
Oh, no, no. When I was a teenager, I was definitely identified as a nerd. But I only started trading dice
Yeah.
uh, for just a few years before I was diagnosed. So it
Oh,
was yeah, I was a collector, but I wasn't what we call in the hobby a dice dragon quite yet.
okay. I like the names. I have to say, I like reading fantasy, so
Yeah.
all of these names really resonate with me.
Let me explain that. That's actually a pretty hilarious thing where they have different tiers of dice collectors, or we have different tiers of dice collectors. There's dice elves, which have a very small but curated selection. And then
Mhm.
there's dice hobbits, who just are very generous. They give away, they collect, they give away. There's dice goblins, who have a very shiny little hoard like a crow or a raccoon.
Mm.
And then there's dice dragons. And if anyone knows what dragons are known for in
Yeah.
European mythology anyway, is they sit on a hoard of treasure.
Yes.
So I've reached that status, I think. I would definitely, I would say so.
Call yourself. Okay, cool. I now have a new moniker for you. Okay, but also I just realized some of our listeners may not really realize when we're talking about dice that we're
Mhm.
talking about something different from your regular, I don't know, game dice.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe you could describe your dice and why you are so entranced by these things.
Okay, when people say dice, normally what you think about are casino dice or like Monopoly dice, which are
Right.
six-sided. They're numbered or pipped with if they're just spots 1 through 6. So when you roll the die, a result of anywhere between 1 and 6 is going to come up. Now, that's well and good. In many games, you can have a lot of fun playing with six-sided die, but a lot of games have die that are not shaped that way. They maybe have up to actually I've seen die that have up to 200 sides, which is pretty interesting. The Dungeons and Dragons typical set are 7 different dice included in one set, ranging from 4-sided all the way up to 20-sided. And what we do is we call it D for dice and then 20.
Mm.
So the D20 is the 20-sided die. There's also a D12, a percentage, a D10, D8, D6, and D4. So the reason why I said this really triggers the raccoon brain or the crow brain is because these are cut like gemstones, like they're faceted. So when you're looking at something with glitter or shine or gloss, and then it has got all these facets, they really do, I love them. Make me think of jewelry.
And like since we're talking and this is like a audio podcast, so
Hmm.
I guess the closest thing is really for listeners to just imagine the typical die, but like literally they're like gemstones. They're very
Yeah.
sparkly, they're very shiny, and they come in so many different colors. So I myself really when I
Yeah.
saw when I saw your dice, all the different colors, like it was really difficult for me to
It's
choose.
triggering.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just
It's
for
like,
people.
ooh.
Yeah, I know, right? It's just for people to get an idea why people can get really into collecting dice. So, moving back to how your company started, like what were the first steps you took to turn, the idea of trading, selling dice into a real business?
Well, from shopping for dice, because I am, at this point, a very well established addict, then I've seen, I'm just going to go out and say it, an addict. But I've seen various other sellers with e-commerce platforms that sell the exact products that I wanted to sell. So looking at their sites, I did see what I wanted to do and what I didn't want, and where they catered to and where I wanted to cater to. I noticed that many, many sellers did not cater to international markets where I could because of, thank you, Taiwan government, the shipping is very affordable. So that was something that I very much set my sights on, which is catering not just to the US, Canada market. Yep, I was looking at other sites. I looked at, watched a couple of YouTube videos. I researched e-commerce platforms, but essentially I kind of just barged into it and learned as I went. It wasn't that well planned.
Okay. That's actually what happens with most businesses, I feel. Like you have an idea, but when
Yeah.
you're actually implementing all of these steps and processes, then you have to, you kind of learn as you do.
Absolutely.
I think that's the process for most businesses, from what I hear, anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. It's learn as you go, definitely. And, you have to be flexible and resourceful and adaptable. If you have these traits, then it's not difficult to start a business, in my opinion.
So, just to confirm, your business is registered here in Taiwan?
Oh, it is not. It's actually an LLC in the United States. Yeah, I kind of fall below certain activities and therefore fit through the loophole of several policies, I think, in both countries. So our factory warehouse is located here, basically. But all of our banking and our sales are routed through a US-based e-commerce platform.
Is it difficult to set up and run the business here in Taiwan?
No, that's the only reason why I ever started it, because Taiwan is a much easier place to source everything, really. So everything from packaging to the mail to having physical space all the way through to obtaining the dice themselves is easier here than it is anywhere else, in my opinion. So not difficult at all.
And how did you get your first customer?
It's actually the first customer for most businesses is your friends come on through first because they want to support you while you're doing your thing. I had an Instagram account where I was just posting pictures of dice before we ever started an e-commerce company. It was just an Instagram account for dice. That's how nerdy I was. So using that is how I grew my business, because at the time it had already had maybe 600 or 700 followers.
Oh, wow.
Of other nerds who love to look at dice.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
So that's how I did it. I leveraged the follower count of my Instagram and pushed up engagement and grew the knowledge that I was out there.
I think that's really cool that you had such an organic growth and then that you already had that following in the beginning. So I think that was to your advantage when you started the business?
Oh, definitely. Very much. If I did not have the social media following, or if I hadn't had the presence that I guess I still have in those, dice collection groups, then I don't think I could have proceeded forward. Like, how would you get your name out? You really couldn't.
Right. You mentioned earlier that your business is actually set up in the US. So does that mean most of your customers are located in the US and Canada?
So if we're counting only the United States, then they make up about 50%-ish of my business, because most tabletop role-playing games are written by people in the US and published there.
That's all for this episode. Join us again next week as we learn about the challenges businesses like Phoenix Dice are facing in the current US administration.
This is Ching and Cho.
And Mary Ann Shoko.
See you guys next week. Bye.